Who broke Nigeria? The Yakubu Gowon story.
A story of a nation at a crossroads. Weeks later, Gowon declared a state of emergency and split the 4 regions of Nigeria into 12 new states, a move designed specifically to dilute Igbo dominance. Of the U.S. released a Giudi the equated by the Efik, the Ibio, a stake in staying with Nigeria rather Biafra, and mobilized for war.
Chapter 4. The War to Keep Nigeria One. The Nigerian Civil War lasted from July 1967 to January 1970. Gowon framed it in a phrase that would become the government's defining slogan. To keep Nigeria one is a task that must be done. It was printed on stamps, painted on buses, chanted at rallies. Militarily, the war unfolded in phases. Initial
Biafran advances, including a startling push into the Midwest. Before we go deeper in today's history, click on the button below to subscribe and turn on your notification deck.
Watch to the end as we unveil the deep truth of the leader who broke Nigeria right here and the reason behind the 1966 massacre.
A grinding Nigerian federal counteroffensive that steadily shrank Biafran territory, and finally, a brutal war of attrition where the battlefield mattered less than the blockade. That blockade is the war's darkest legacy, and it sits at the center of any honest reckoning with Gowon's record. As Biafran territory shrank, the Tojuku's forces were diverting humanitarian aid to sustain the military effort. Whatever the strategic logic, the human effect was mass starvation. Early images from Nigeria became some of the first war photographs to shock a global television audience and help birth the modern humanitarian aid movement. Organizations like Médecins Sans Frontières traced their founding impulse directly to volunteer doctors who witnessed the Biafran famine and became convinced that international law needed a mechanism for crossing borders to save civilians, regardless of politics. Estimates of total deaths from the war, combat, disease, and starvation combined, range from 500,000 to 2 million. With most historians now converging on a figure of roughly 1 to 2 million, the overwhelming majority Biafran civilians.
Gowon's defenders point to a genuinely remarkable fact. He refused, publicly and repeatedly, to describe the war as an ethnic conflict against the Igbo people, and he resisted pressure from hardliners in his own government to pursue a policy of extermination or mass reprisal. When Biafra finally collapsed in January 1970, Gowon delivered a speech that startled the world. No victor, no vanquished. There would be no war crimes tribunals against Biafran leadership, no formal program of ethnic retribution, and a stated policy of reconciliation, reconstruction, and reintegration. The 3 R's for the defeated East, compared to the aftermath of many 20th century civil wars. This restraint was genuinely unusual, and it is the single strongest argument in Gowon's favor. Whenever the who broke Nigeria question is raised, whatever his failures, he did not, in victory, choose to finish the job the pogroms of 1966 had started. But critics, including many Igbo scholars and survivors, argue that no victor, no vanquished was rhetoric that outran reality. Federal reconstruction of the East was slow and underfunded.
A notorious banking policy after the war capped the amount of Biafran currency that could be exchanged for Nigerian pounds at £20 per person. Regardless of a family's actual pre-war savings, instantly and deliberately impoverishing the Igbo middle class and, critics argue, functioning as a form of economic punishment even as the political rhetoric preached reconciliation.
Igbo civil servants and military officers found re-entry into federal institutions slower and more limited than promised. The wounds of the blockade were not something a speech could undo. Chapter 5: The Oil Boom and the Squandered Decade. If the war years present a complicated moral ledger, the years that followed present a much simpler one. And it is here that Gowon's harshest critics feel on firmest ground.
Nigeria emerged from civil war just as global oil prices began an extraordinary climb, supercharged by the 1973 oil crisis. Nigerian government oil revenue exploded, from a few $100 million a year before the war to many billions annually by the mid-1970s. It was, on paper, one of the great windfalls in the history of any post-colonial African state, a nation freshly reunified. Flush with cash, with the chance to rebuild infrastructure, fund education, and diversify an economy that had been overwhelmingly agricultural just a decade before.
Gowon himself, in a moment of startling public candor in 1975, said that Nigeria's problem was not money, but how to spend it. His critics have quoted that line back at him for 50 years, because what followed was not disciplined investment, but a now legendary cycle of waste. The most infamous single episode was the Cement Armada of 1975. The government ordered so much cement, for barracks, for infrastructure, for a bloated, patronage-driven procurement system, that more than 400 ships carrying cement backed up in Lagos harbor at once, some waiting for over a year to unload. At a demurrage cost to the Nigerian treasury, estimated in the hundreds of millions of dollars.
Government payrolls swelled. Contracts were awarded with little oversight to politically connected middlemen. Nigeria's currency strengthened on the back of oil. Revenue in a way that quietly devastated the country's non-oil export sectors, of a textbook case of what economists later termed the Dutch disease, where a resource boom hollows out the rest of economy even as national wealth appears to rise.
And Gowon kept postponing the promise that had, in many ways, justified his continued rule in the first place: a return to civilian, democratic government. In 1970, he announced a 9-year transition timetable. By 1974, with the target date approaching, he went on national radio and announced that the handover, a first originally promised for 1976, meant it was being indefinitely postponed, citing the country's continued fragility.
It was, for many Nigerians who had tolerated years of military rule on the promise that it was temporary, the moment Gowon's legitimacy began to visibly erode. Even soldiers who had once been his allies began quietly concluding that his government had drifted from wartime necessity into simple entrenchment.